If you've ever had pattern paper, vellum, or other paper scraps piling up, found lost inks that were stashed away in a corner, and had a hard time finding the perfect sentiment to stamp on your project, I've got a genius system to corral them all together so everything stays organized, easy to grab, and your craft room finally feels under control. In this video, I'll share 5 hacks to help get your supplies sorted once and for all. So let's dive in. So here's something interesting I wanted to share with you. I ordered the set of pattern papers on Temu, and while the papers themselves are really pretty, what absolutely blew me away was the packaging idea. They came in these handy sleeves, and I realized how convenient that could be for storing not just my pattern paper when they come as loose sheets, but for storing all the little scraps that come from cutting up the set. That's when I got the idea to make my own version. So I started experimenting. This one here was my prototype. You can see it's not even glued down properly because I was still figuring out the measurements and making notes all over it. Then I tried a few different ways of constructing it and finally ended up with these more polished ones. They're honestly so easy to make and such a game changer for keeping scraps organized. I can fit in the entire pad in here, but the idea isn't to just stick a pad in here when it's unused because it could be a little tight, but to use a sleeve when it's been cut up and has a mountain of scraps. This really helps keep all the scraps and the original paper pad together instead of storing them in bags and envelopes as I had been doing. At first, I thought about making them into full 6x6 sleeves like this original one, but that would mean using larger cardstock, like a 12x12 or a 9x14 inch sheet. And those aren't really cheap, so I quickly discarded that option. Instead, I designed my version to work with a single A2 size sheet of cardstock. It's much more affordable because you don't need heavyweight cardstock for this, and it's still super functional. I'll show you exactly how to make them. First, I'll cut this cardstock in half, just like you would for A2 panels. So let's go ahead and trim this down at 5.5 inch along the long edge of the sheet. Now I have 2 pieces, panel A and panel B. For panel B, I'll rotate it and cut it down to 6 inches. This edge is 8.5 inches since it's an A2 size. So after trimming at 8 inches, you'll have a small scrap left over, but don't throw that away because you can always use it later for sentiments or small die cuts. All right, cutting is done. Now let's move on to the second step, which is scoring. I'll start with the easier piece first. This one is 6 inches long, so I'll turn it around to the 5.5 inch side and score at 5 inches, and I'll give it a nice crease. That score line will be the bottom fold of our sleeve. Next, I need to die cut the aperture, and this part is absolutely optional. You don't have to add a window, but I really like how it looks, and it makes the sleeve look a bit fancier and also lets you see the pattern through the front. This sleeve will finally end up measuring about 6 inches wide by 5 inches tall, just like my sample here. The reason I score first is so I can easily find the true center for cutting out the aperture. I usually just eyeball it, nothing too precise here. Once it's cut, don't toss that centerpiece either, because you can totally use it for a sentiment or a panel on another project. So now our front panel is ready. Let's set that aside and move on to the next piece. For the panel A, I'll use the long edge and score at 3/4 inch and again at 1 1/4 inches. Then rotate it and repeat the same thing on the other side, 3/4 inch and 1 1/4 inches. Now along the short edge, that's the 5.5 inch side, I'll score at 5 inches, just like I did for the other panel. I'm using a small scoring board here, but if you have a larger one, that works perfectly. I do have a 12x12 scoring board, but I wanted to show you that this can easily be done even on a small one. That's done. Let me show you what this looks like. You can see I have score lines at 3/4 inch and 1 1/4 inches on both sides. Those lines basically land around 7.5 and 7 3/4 inches in case you are using a larger scoring board. So now I have these vertical score lines and one bottom score line. You'll notice they form two small sections on each side, a rectangle and a square. I will remove the squares on both sides, but keep the rectangles. But instead of cutting straight up, I like to trim at a slight angle or miter it so the corners fold in nicely without extra bulk. I'll do the same on the other side, cut slightly at an angle, then remove that square piece. I can't go too big with the angle though, or I'll end up with a gap when it's folded. Although that's not a big deal since the outer flap will cover it, but the reinforcement will be better when there's no gap. Once that's done, I'll go ahead and start folding along all the score lines. If you're using thick cardstock, remember to score both sides of the cardstock before folding because that helps break down the paper fibers and creates a cleaner fold. I'm using 80-pound cardstock here, so it's not too heavy. Now fold in the sides and the bottom. See, it's already starting to take shape. Next, I'll attach the front and back panels together. I'll bring in my magnetic glass mat for this part because I like to use my magnets to hold everything in place when I work. I prefer using double-sided tape instead of liquid glue for this, mainly because glue takes time to dry and the pieces tend to shift around when I try to line them up. Double-sided adhesive gives me instant hold, which makes assembly much easier. I'm just adding 2 tiny strips of tape on these 2 little flaps. I'm using 1/4 inch tape here that I got from AliExpress ages ago, but 1/2 inch works too. I'm making sure the tape stays just shy of the score lines because I don't want to go over them or the folds won't close properly. Once the tape is in place on both sides, I'll make sure the folds are crisp. In the next step, I like to start by removing the backing from one of the small tabs. Fold it in and hold it up straight to line up the fold carefully with the bottom piece, and then press it down. I like to work from one side at a time because it gives me more control. If the edges don't line up perfectly, it will be hard to get the paper pad into the sleeve because it will become too tight. I'll attach the other side the same way, pressing down firmly from the inside to make sure it sticks. Now I'll remove the backing paper on this edge and line up the top panel and stick it down. You see, this didn't line up perfectly, but it's a really tiny sliver, so it shouldn't interfere greatly when sliding the paper pad in. I'll remove the backing from the bottom strip next and stick that down as well. And that's it. Super easy, right? Alright, so this one's all done too, so let's test it out. I'll slide the pattern papers in. It feels nice and snug, which is exactly what I want. And there it is. The best part is once you slide your pattern paper in, the scraps can tuck neatly in the back and they won't fall out through the front window. It's a simple but really smart storage solution. I have been making these sleeves whenever I cut up pattern paper of late, so I can easily store all the scraps together. Let me know in the comments if you found this useful and if you'll be creating these sleeves for yourself. The next hack will save you a lot of grief when you're looking for the perfect sentiment to use on your projects. And I have to admit, this is still very much a work in progress. I've been so busy that I haven't had the time to go through my entire stamp collection to fully catalog and store everything properly. Right now, I keep most of my stamp sets in baskets, but I've started a system that's slowly coming together. Let me show you what I mean. This set here is from one of my very first stamp sets from Amazon. Over the years, I've also collected stamp sets from AliExpress, especially from Alina Cuttle, Altenew, Simon Says Stamps, Spellbinders, Paper Tray Ink, and so many other brands. So what I've started doing is keeping a binder to catalog my stamps so it's easier to find a specific sentiment. Now, it's still a work in progress, as I mentioned, and as you can see, I have several categories I still need to finish cataloging. But here's how my system works. When my collection was smaller, I used to simply ink up each stamp set and stamp the images onto a sheet of copy paper. That gave me a quick visual reference of what I had. For example, here's a page from my mixed sentiments section because sometimes stamp sets contain mixed sentiments, so this includes everything from happy birthday and thanks to congrats. Then I have other sections like encouragement where the set is themed. Having these themes grouped together makes it much easier to find what I need when I'm designing a card. If I'm working on a birthday card, I'll check both the mixed sentiments and birthday sections for the perfect sentiment. And once I find the sentiment I want, because each one is labeled with a code like B1 here, I'll dip into my box and find the corresponding stamp set. Because that same code appears on the actual stamp set itself, which I store in baskets. So if I see B1 in my binder, I know exactly which basket to pull from to find that stamp set. No rummaging through piles of stamps anymore. So some are in Amazon boxes, others in drawers or baskets on my bookshelves. The idea is that if I'm looking for, say, an encouragement sentiment and the binder tells me it's labeled D, I can just go straight to that basket marked D and pull that set out. These ones here, for example, are from Altenew. They're all labeled. I had another idea and thought it would be good to stamp out entire stamp sets, not just the sentiments. That way I have a visual reference for both the images and the words in each die set. But I think that system needs a little more thought to see if it's more efficient. So that's where I'm at with this system. Definitely a work in progress, but it's been really useful so far. Hopefully this gives you some ideas or inspiration to create your own organization system, because it doesn't have to be perfect. This is just what works for me, but you can definitely take these ideas and adapt them to fit your own style and collection. Okay, so the next storage hack I want to share is about how I'm storing my ink and cardstock swatches so I don't forget what I actually own and keep pulling the same ones from my stash over and over again. I'm way behind on these, but I wanted to show you how I handled them. I actually demonstrated this in an earlier video about 11 laminator hacks you can use in your craft room, but I'll show it again briefly here. This is the laminator I use and it's fantastic. It has so many features. It's already heating up and I've set it to 3 millimeters because that's the thickness of my laminating sheets. It also comes with a trimmer, binder rings, a corner rounder, a one-hole punch, and even an extra cutting blade. I demonstrated this laminator in great detail in my earlier video, so I'll link to that video as well as the laminator in the video description in case you're interested. I've already done some prep work so I don't waste your time. I've arranged a few of my ink swatches that I wanted to protect in the laminating sheets. Of course, laminating helps preserve the color over time so it doesn't fade or discolor. In fact, you'll see that the colors will become more vibrant like the original colors since the heat reactivates them through the lamination process. This is another project I've been wanting to do, and I've already started collecting little cardstock samples as I cut my paper. I'm going to laminate these as well, but not in this video here. I'm just waiting to fix my Cricut soon so I can make the labels look neat and fancy. So let's get started. My laminator is already hot and I'm using a sheet of copy paper as a carrier sheet. It's not always necessary, but it really helps feed smaller pieces through smoothly. This laminator actually came with a whole assortment of laminating pocket sizes, large, medium, and small. I've already used up the smaller ones, but the larger sheets are great for bigger projects or if you want to laminate multiple pieces at once. Or you could cut them down and use them for smaller projects as well. If you haven't used laminating sheets before, they're basically pockets joined at one side like a booklet. You just slip your pieces inside, close it up, and feed it through the laminator sealed edge first. The sheet I'm using now is actually one I've already cut before, so it's a bit uneven. That's why I'm using a piece of copy paper as a carrier sheet to make sure it runs through smoothly and doesn't get caught inside the laminator. That way it won't damage the machine. Once everything's in place, I'll feed it through and let the laminator do its thing. This machine is great. It's quiet, efficient, and creates a really nice even seal. Looks like this one got a little stuck at the edge. That's probably because that part wasn't completely sealed between two sheets. I'll pass the next cloth through without a carrier sheet this time. Next step is to trim the edges and cut the pieces down the middle. You can use your trimmer or scissors, whatever's easiest. All I need to do now is use the 1-hole punch that's also included with the laminator and then add the swatches to one of the binder rings that came with the machine. I'll repeat the same process on the next lot as well, and I'll complete the rest of the swatches off camera. This system really helps keep everything organized and easy to flip through. And the inks look so much more vibrant now that they were activated by the heat. And this way I know the inks won't fade over time either. Now, let me quickly explain my swatching process in case that's of interest to you. For each ink, I used one of my journaling stencils to do a gradient blend from light to dark so I can see how the ink behaves. I used a small stamp with the ink to see how it looks in a more solid format. And then I wrote the ink brand and name on each swatch. Normally it would look nicer if done with a Cricut or a label maker, but since my Cricut needs to be fixed, I just used a gel pen. For cardstock, I'll do the same thing as soon as I've added a few more to my collection. I'll cut strips, laminate them, and eventually label them. Once laminated, they're protected and easy to store. So now I have a compact, fade-resistant, and organized system for both inks and cardstock swatches, all neatly stored on binder rings and ready for reference. Here's the next hack I wanted to share. You saw me working on my swatches earlier, and I ended up with all these strips. Once laminated, the sheets become as tough as acetate, so instead of cutting up new acetate for pop-up cards or other projects, I can just reuse these strips. Of course, I keep all my scraps. If you've been watching my videos, you know I'm a hoarder. I fold the strips neatly and store them in these folders that I created. I won't go into how to make these folders in this video, but you can check out my laminator hacks video I mentioned earlier. So here's my folder for acetate scraps. Whenever I need small bits, I just grab them from here. These folders are super easy to make and they really help organize your craft room efficiently. I use Velcro dots that I got from the Dollar Tree to keep them closed. I also use similar folders for stencils and masks. For example, I created stencils for clouds and other designs, some of which are made from laminated sheets and some from packaging tape and cardstock. They're all easy to store and keep handy for future projects. Here's another folder. This one stores all my vellum scraps. You can see I have a ton of vellum here, and my folders help keep everything organized, and I stack them in my IKEA bookshelf. It's such a simple way to keep scraps tidy and accessible. Now, the final storage hack I want to share is for sentiments. I got this idea from Jennifer McGuire. It's a sticky album. Basically, it doesn't have adhesive, but it has a piece of cellophane that holds your pieces in place. I keep all my spare sentiments or die cuts on these pages, and I've created sections for different types of die cuts. The album has plenty of pages left, so I can continue adding to it. This album is great because sometimes you just need a quick sentiment. You can grab exactly what you need without hunting through all your supplies. I got the sticky album from Amazon. I'll try to link to it on the Canadian store if it's still available, but you should be able to find similar albums on Amazon in your country. I've had mine for a couple of years and it's still going strong. So those are the storage hacks I wanted to share today. Hopefully you found something useful, and if you want more ideas, definitely check out my Laminator hacks video and you can watch that video here.